He's a good math student, but he was not like really quick with it. And so that combination just kind of created something that sort of exploded when he was 10. When you hit fourth grade, it's a major leveling up point. I
Yeah.
think it's so good for people to know that go in advance.
Welcome to the Simplified Organization Podcast, 15-minute conversations with real moms about managing our homes and family life cheerfully to the glory of God. We can actually enjoy housework and homeschooling and love being homemakers and homeschoolers when we focus on truth and work with gratitude. I'm Mystie Winckler, homeschool mom of 5 with 2 graduates and author of Convivial Homeschool, Gospel Encouragement for Keeping Your Sanity while living and learning alongside your kids. I write and podcast at Simply Convivial about homemaking, homeschooling, and doing life cheerfully. And I also run Convivial Circle, a community helping women to excel at homemaking and do life cheerfully. And today I'm joined by one of my original members of Convivial Circle, Lauren Scott. Lauren makes her home in the foothills of the Arkansas Ozarks, where she and her husband Nathaniel are raising their 2 energetic teenage boys on the scriptures, living books, the great outdoors, and lots of meaningful work experience. Lauren has been home educating now for over a decade and organizes a local co-op. She's an avid gardener and reader, and she writes about the Christian life, books, and homeschooling at keptandkeeping.com. Thank you so much for joining me, Lauren.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
When I saw your updated bio, I was like, teenage boys. It's like, oh man, it's been a long time.
Yes. Yes. I think I started following you when my oldest was in his first grade year, maybe. So,
That sounds about right. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. It's been a blessing to have you coaching me through all these years.
Well, it's been great being in conversation with you. And I'm really excited about our conversation today because we were talking about having some conversations about homeschooling as we get started on another school year. And you suggested talking about imperviousness, which is kind of one of those perennial topics. It was something I learned from my homeschool mentor, Cindy Rollins. And we just need to keep revisiting it because it is something that's needed and not talked about that often. And it is a difficult skill you only need it when things are difficult.
Yes.
It turns out things will be difficult. So you had mentioned then that you have had to employ imperviousness and kind of new ways as your kids have gotten older. You want to tell us about that?
Yes. Now, like when I first heard you talking about imperviousness, that was a completely new word to me. So I kind of had to like let it sink in, understand what that meant. I know you've talked about being the wall, right? So your kids are kind of bumping up against you as a wall. You are not giving way to their emotional ups and downs. And I knew how to do this like since the time my youngest was 8 months old. He would experiment with what happens if I don't give mama kisses, and he's always been my more direct one. It's like, okay, I'm going to tell you that I don't like this. And so I knew I needed a guard up for that. But my other son, it's always been, he's more compliant, right? And so I had way more of the emotional ups and downs, not knowing what to do with them with him. And so it's like the dragging your feet kind of thing, the whining. And, at age 9, we were dealing with talking back. And I was pretty good about catching those things and just saying, no, I want to hear your thoughts, but at some point I'm going to put a line in the sand and say, you may not talk on this subject anymore because you need to accept what I'm saying. And so I was learning those things along the way, largely, I think, because of some of what I was learning from Art of Homeschooling and putting it into practice. But where it really, really was tested was when my oldest son was 10. And like we had a long history with math being difficult. I started out way too much, too early, too impatient. That created problems. He was not just like the fastest math student. He's a good math student, but he was not like really quick with it. And so that combination just kind of created something that sort of exploded when he was 10. When you hit fourth grade, it's a major leveling up point.
Yeah.
I think it's so good for people to know that go in advance. Like, just expect it long division, but not just long division.
Yes.
Everything can be hard. Um, so that year we were using and had been using a very like teacher intensive math curriculum. It was wonderful. But I was very much involved in the process. And my son and I both, I think, were very emotionally invested in how things were going from day to day. And it was not tenable anymore. Like something had to change. And my husband actually stepped in and insisted that we switch to a math program that took me out of the picture. It's
Mm.
kind of humbling to say that I was the problem. I was unable to maintain, stability through his ups and downs, whether it's performance or attitude. I was just too emotionally wrapped up in it, and I had to be removed from the situation. I was not impervious. Like stuff was really getting to me at this point. And so my husband wisely stepped in and said, "Here, we're gonna structure this differently." And what he did, what I think was really important, and it was instructive for me. I've learned a lot from his example. He was homeschooled. And he has experience being a 10-year-old homeschool boy who made his mama cry. And he knew that we could get through this because he had and his mom had. So he was able to give that kind of we're playing the long game perspective, which I know you talk about in Art of Homeschooling. But at this point, I needed like boots on the ground reminder from my husband, and it was really, really helpful. But he set up kind of natural consequences to where it wasn't going to be a personal interaction deciding how are we going to respond to what's going on right now. It was like we're going to lay down the law, a very impersonal law, so that you understand on the front end what will happen if you don't stay focused, if you're not finishing your work in a timely manner. So what my husband did, he identified that there was like a character issue that was more important than the math.
Mm.
And the character issue is even more important than my idealized application of educational philosophy. I had realized I would prefer to have like shorter lessons, like we started off the wrong foot there. And so I was like, I wanted that corrective. But my husband said, no, actually, he needs to feel the consequence of whether or not he's putting in the effort. And so for that year, I really just had to trust the Lord, trust my husband. It was really hard. But he saw this as character thing that was not just math. And so he created a chore chart for our son. So it gave him more responsibility, even outside of school. And he gave him, set expectations on you're going to finish a math lesson a day, as long as it takes you. And you're going to do it. You're reading the lesson yourself, and you're taking full responsibility for this. And so it was a major call to level up. And the reality is, if he was not diligent, then he wouldn't get free time. There were a few nights, and this was painful, but he'd be up at like 9 o'clock still finishing math. And that is just like, you're not supposed to have homework in homeschool, all these things that I was reacting against, but it was actually exactly what was needed. Now, one other thing was that because my husband kind of laid down the law, then he personally was able to provide the emotional support that our son needed and coaching. It's like you're bumping up against this law, this standard, but I want to help you as you're doing that. I'll comfort you when you fail. Like my son had actually developed some negative scripts in his head, negative self-talk, saying I'm bad at math, I'm stupid. And it's like, oh my goodness, I had never said anything like that to him.
Yeah.
But my impatience and why don't you get this? That communicated enough, and he finished the story in his own mind. And so I'm just like, I was at this point seeing the impact of my own sinful impatience over the years. And I really felt like I had failed my son. I kind of, this is the story of our homeschool. This is horrible. It was a very low, very like humbling point. Definitely the hardest year of our homeschool thus far. But so the reality was that we both needed to level up, and we did. It was a very hard year, but my son was doing the work, and I was learning from my husband's example what that looks like to be firm, but to be loving, to provide a shoulder to cry on sometimes when you need um, to recognize, yeah, this is hard, but I'm right here with you. Okay, we're going to grow together. So that was just incredibly instructive for me. And one other practical thing that we did too was, because my son had a hard time focusing and catching his mistakes, my husband also created a little card for him that included like the types of mistakes he should look for before, his work gets graded. So look for arithmetic errors, copying errors, attention to detail, or understanding errors. And so he could look for those himself, but then once the paper is graded, then he goes back over and we talk about which kind of mistakes they were. So it was a very much constructive type of rules of the game, right? And so that was really helpful. There was so much that was gained in that year. And by the end of it, our son was actually completing stuff in a more timely manner. And the next year, after discussing where we'd been and where we needed to go, I actually got to go back to the teacher intensive curriculum that it was an enjoyable curriculum. We did that for one more year. And then after that point, and that was really like a healing year for us, for both my son and I, to be able to come together again in the same atmosphere, like same thing, math, and to actually enjoy it. And that was just such a gift from God. And so much of that, like I think you said this was in the attitude alignment sheet from the expectation lesson, that as homeschool moms, we work for the peace that comes on the other side of war. And it definitely was a battle, but there was indeed hope on the other side. And that was it. I don't believe we would have had that experience, that kind of healing and really positive experience with math that one last year before he went completely, just go off with the textbook by himself. If we hadn't had that really difficult year, where my husband was like, we're gonna remove you from this process and make you both level up. So yeah, that was very much learning imperviousness in the trenches.
Yeah, it's so true that often the fruit we need and the best fruit comes after we do the hard thing and we go through the hard season. Like it is the hard season that produces the good fruit. And we so often think that there's some way to just shortcut to the fruit of eating the humble pie, doing what needs to be done to restore and rebuild relationships and habits and all those things.
Yes, it's tempting to think that if my son is having a hard time, then either he or I must be doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not true. Now, sometimes it might be true that I'm doing something wrong, but
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story, Lauren. I'm sure that's going to be an encouragement that, I mean, the 10, 11, 12-year-old boy scenario, especially when it's your oldest, it can hit, but it's a thing. And it is a call to level up. So hearing the stories, not just, it's hard, but it's like, it's hard. You need to notice that something different needs to happen for, puberty, the children are leveling up and things do have to shift and you have to take the next step to help them level up and grow in maturity and responsibility. It does take intention and work, but there is fruit. You can have that relational restoration and hope and joy in it and definitely after it.
yes, for sure.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks for having me.
We could all use a bit more imperviousness in our homeschool. And in different ways and from different angles, that's what my course, The Art of Homeschooling, helps you practice. You can make sure that you have the right pieces for accountability in your homeschool and also the right pieces to help you keep your head and your heart in the right place while you homeschool so you can disciple your kids while educating them, keeping in mind the academics, but also the character training that happens at the same time. They are really interwoven pieces that can't be separated. We just need the mindset and the practices in place to help us use the moments wisely. And Art of Homeschooling will help you recognize those moments and know what to do with them. We're about to start working through this course as a community on August 30th. So find the link in the description or go to convivialcircle.com to join us in learning the art of homeschooling.